Mia grew up in a tiny countryside town with her parents and older brother Tyler. Life was really tough. Her family barely had enough to eat or earn, and every day felt like a struggle. Her dad worked low-wage jobs, fixing fences and hauling heavy sacks at the market, while her mom spent long hours selling vegetables under the hot sun just to scrape together enough money for dinner. Tyler tried to find work too, but no one hired him because of his lack of experience. They'd seen far worse times, days when they had no home at all, even being forced out of their house because they couldn't pay the rent. They once lived on the streets in an abandoned shed with nowhere to go when it rained. Yet, despite everything, their parents always insisted on the importance of learning, often saying that money might come and go, but knowledge would never be taken away, even when they had no food, shoes, or proper clothes. They made sure both Mia and Tyler went to school. Mia was a dedicated student who worked hard even when hunger gnawed at her. She refused to let poverty hold her back, and one day her determination paid off. A scholarship came her way, offering the only chance to turn her life around. Leaving her small town behind, she headed off to college. After years of studying, Mia finally graduated, proud of herself for overcoming so many hardships. She landed a job as a cashier at a small store. It wasn't glamorous, but it was enough to start sending money home, help her parents, and maybe even begin building a new life. She hoped that things would finally be different, that she could leave her troubled past behind. But her background trailed her like a shadow. As a young woman ready to build a life, Mia dreamed of love, a caring husband, and a cozy home filled with warmth and laughter. In the beginning, men showed interest, smiling at her, asking her out, and making her feel special. However, once they learned about her family's history, everything changed. They suddenly backed off, unwilling to marry a girl with a history of homelessness, unwilling to build a future with someone who had so little to offer. Every rejection stung, but Mia kept telling herself that she had overcome worse before and could do it again. At the same time, her brother Tyler faced similar rejection. Every time he tried to win a woman's heart, his background was the deal breaker. The constant whispers about their past hurt them both deeply, and watching Tyler suffer made Mia's own heart ache. One evening, as Mia sat quietly at home, her mom walked in holding a brown envelope, with her dad following close behind, looking serious. "Mia, come inside. We need to talk," her mom said gently. Sitting at their small wooden table, Mia watched as her father placed the envelope in front of her. Confused, she listened as her father cleared his throat and announced, "A wealthy man wants to marry you." Mia's heart pounded. Her mom confirmed, "His name is Mr. Alexander. He's the richest man in our area." Mia frowned. "Alexander? Really?" Her dad sighed, explaining that although the name was well known, few had actually seen him. He had left the town long ago and now lived in the city, owning land, farms, and several businesses. With trembling hands, Mia picked up the letter and began reading the words, though they blurred as she tried to make sense of them. "I am 60 years old. I'm a man of means. I will take care of your daughter and your family. This marriage will bring her comfort and security." The mention of 60 years old made her stomach churn. Her mom's soft voice repeated, "He wants to marry you, Mia. He says he'll look after you and us." Silence fell as Mia struggled to find words. Just then, there was a knock at the door. Her father went to answer it, and standing outside were two men carrying sacks of maize, rice, and flour. Another man followed with a basket full of vegetables and bottles of cooking oil. "Who sent this?" her dad asked, his voice trembling. The tallest man smiled and replied, "Mr. Alexander. This is just a small gift. There will be more when he comes to see you." Mia watched as her mom covered her mouth with tears while her dad nodded slowly, thanking them as they left. The food they brought was enough to last for weeks. Her dad then turned to her and said, "Mia, this man can change our lives." Her mom, still wiping away tears, added, "Just think about it, sweetheart." Mia's heart pounded with uncertainty. Was this really her only escape? A few days later, Mia sat on her bed, staring at the flickering light of a small lamp. Tears filled her eyes, but she held them back. This wasn't the life she wanted. Only 23, Mia had dreams of falling in love, marrying someone who made her heart sing, and building a joyful future. But now, those dreams seemed impossible. Mr. Alexander was 60, far too old for her. She reread the letter over and over, hoping for a miracle, but the truth stayed the same. She was being asked to marry a man old enough to be her father. Her heart ached. She wanted to refuse and run away, but then she thought of her family. She remembered the pain in her mom's eyes when the food had arrived. The first time in a long while that her mom wasn't worried about them going hungry. She recalled the exhaustion on her dad's face and the way he sat in silence, too weak to speak sometimes. And then she remembered the medical report she had found hidden among old papers in a wooden box. A report that revealed her father was seriously ill and needed an expensive surgery. He hadn't told anyone because he didn't want to worry them. Now, knowing the truth, she couldn't pretend anymore. Mia thought about Tyler and how hard he had tried, only to be turned away because of their poverty. He deserved a chance at a better life too, but the world wouldn't give him one. Wiping away her tears, she took a deep breath and decided, if this marriage was the price for her father to live, for her mom to stop worrying, and for her brother to have a shot at a better future, then she would do it. She walked over to where her parents sat, their hopeful eyes fixed on her. Swallowing hard, she whispered, if it means sacrificing myself for my family, then I will do it. Her mom burst into tears while her dad closed his eyes and exhaled deeply. It was done. She had made her choice. The day arrived, and Mia sat quietly on a wooden stool with her hands folded in her lap, her heart thumping as Mr. Alexander was about to arrive. Her mom had dressed her in her best outfit, a simple blue dress that had seen many days but still looked decent. Her hair was neatly tied back, and a touch of oil made her skin glow. Her dad sat beside her with his arms folded and an unreadable expression, while Tyler stood near the door, watching the road. Soon, a black car pulled up along the dusty town road. Mia's heart raced as the car stopped in front of their house and the door opened. Out stepped a man, Mr. Alexander. He was older and wrinkled, just as she had imagined, with completely gray hair, a slightly bent back, and slow, measured steps. Yet his face was calm, and when he smiled, warmth filled his eyes. Mia felt her breath catch. She had feared he might be cruel or arrogant, but now, looking at him, he didn't seem so bad at all. He greeted her parents first, shaking her dad's hand with genuine respect, and then turned to her. "So you must be Mia," he said in a deep but gentle voice. Unable to find her words, she nodded. He chuckled and added, "I've heard so much about you, a smart, strong young woman." Glancing at her parents for reassurance, he invited her to sit with him on a bench outside. Her legs felt weak, but she slowly walked over and sat down. Although everyone around them was watching, for a moment she focused solely on him. They talked for a long while. She had expected awkward silence, but he spoke with an easy confidence, as if they were old friends. He asked about her life, her dreams, her family, and listened intently when she spoke. He never rushed her, never talked down to her, and instead smiled warmly, saying, "You're such a bright young woman. I really admire you." Even though she had been terrified of this meeting, sitting beside him made her fears fade a little. Yes, he was much older, but at least he was kind and treated her with genuine care. As the days passed, the wedding plans were set. Her mom and a few of the local women helped her prepare, sewing a simple white dress that was far from fancy, yet beautiful in its own way. They braided her hair carefully and applied a bit of oil to give her skin a soft glow. People whispered among themselves, some with excitement, others with pity. A young woman marrying a much older man, all because she had no choice for the sake of her family. Mia heard the whispers, but she remained quiet. Her mind was made up. On the morning of the wedding, she stared at her reflection in a small mirror. Though she looked like a bride, she didn't feel like one. Her hands trembled as she adjusted her veil. Her mom entered, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "This is your life now, Mia. Be strong, be a good wife, and always remember, you're still my daughter." Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded, accepting her fate. The ceremony itself was simple yet grand in its own right. Neighbors and locals gathered, some out of curiosity, others happy for her, and a few just interested in the food. Mr. Alexander stood at the front in a well-tailored suit, his eyes warm and his smile soft. Though he was older, he didn't seem intimidating at that moment. Mia walked slowly toward him, her steps heavy, her heart aching with a desire to run or cry out, but she couldn't. Standing beside him, her hands went cold as he gently took them in his. When the vows were exchanged, the officiant asked, "Do you, Mia, take Mr. Alexander to be your husband?" Her lips trembled as she closed her eyes and took a deep breath, managing to whisper, "I do." Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't wipe them away. Though Mr. Alexander wasn't the man she had dreamed of marrying, she promised herself that if she was going to make this commitment, she would give it her all, caring for him and staying true. As soon as the ceremony ended, the crowd cheered, and just like that, Mia was officially a wife. The journey to the city was long and quiet. In a luxurious car, Mia sat beside Mr. Alexander, staring out the window as the dusty town roads transformed into wide, smooth streets filled with bright lights, noise, and busy people. It felt like entering a whole new world. Her heart raced as the car finally stopped in front of a massive mansion. The gates opened and they drove inside. The house was grand and breathtaking, much larger than anything she had ever seen. Everything was shiny and expensive, with servants rushing to take their luggage inside. This was now her home. Following Mr. Alexander into the mansion, Mia felt small and out of place. The rooms were enormous, and the floors were so polished they reflected the light overhead. She had never experienced such comfort before, yet instead of feeling happy, fear gripped her. The wedding had seemed like a distant dream, but now, facing the reality of sharing a bed with her new husband, her heart pounded with dread. Mr. Alexander noticed her unease, and with a gentle smile he said, "Mia, I know this is all new for you. You don't need to be scared. This is your home now." She nodded, though her hands still trembled. After a while, Mia excused herself and went to the bedroom, which was enormous with a soft white bed, a gilded mirror, and flowing curtains. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring down at the floor, her heart thumping in her ears. Soon, Mr. Alexander entered and softly placed a warm hand on her shoulder. "I'm going to take a shower first, okay? You can relax here." She nodded again, unable to speak. Mr. Alexander picked up a towel and walked into the bathroom, and Mia listened as the water began to run. Minutes slipped into an hour, then two. The water kept running. She started to worry, glancing repeatedly at the bathroom door, her breath growing shallow. Should she knock? Call his name? Something didn't feel right. With her hands tightly gripping the bedsheet, she sat there, the sound of running water filling the room. Time passed, and her anxiety grew. Despite wanting to knock, she hesitated, afraid of interrupting his privacy if something was truly wrong. Exhaustion from the long day, the wedding, the journey, the overwhelming new life began to take its toll, and her eyes grew heavy. She lay down, promising herself a short rest, but before she knew it, sleep took over. A sudden sound jolted her awake. Her eyes fluttered open as the bathroom door creaked. She sat up quickly, heart racing. The shower was still running, but the man stepping out wasn't Mr. Alexander. Mia froze. Standing before her was a young man, tall, strong, and handsome, with wet hair, a smooth, youthful face, and his body wrapped in a towel. Her breath caught in her throat. She didn't recognize him, and fear turned her body cold. "Where's Mr. Alexander? Who are you?" she screamed, stumbling backward and clinging to the bed sheets as she trembled uncontrollably. The young man raised his hand slowly, trying to soothe her. "Mia," he said softly. Her eyes widened in shock. She recognized that voice. It was Mr. Alexander's voice, but how could that be? Shaking her head in disbelief, she thought this had to be some sort of trick, a nightmare. "No, this can't be real," she whispered as the young man stepped closer. Before she could react, he gently pulled her into his arms. His hands were warm and steady as he murmured, "Mia." Then he kissed her, slow, soft, and deep, filling her with a strange, unexpected warmth. For a brief moment, she forgot everything. The room, the fear, everything melted away with the kiss. But then reality crashed back in. She pushed him away, her breathing uneven and body trembling. "Where is my husband?" she cried, tears streaming down her face. The young man sighed and stepped forward again. "I'm your husband," he insisted. Mia shook her head violently. "No, this isn't true," she sobbed, falling to her knees. The young man knelt beside her, careful not to touch her this time. "I know it's hard to believe, but I am Mr. Alexander. I always have been." She looked up at him, her face streaked with tears. Taking a deep breath, he continued, "I used special makeup to look old because I needed to see who you truly were." Her eyes widened in disbelief. "Why?" she whispered. With a gentle yet serious expression, he explained, "My grandfather once told me that a good woman is found not through wealth, but through wisdom. I have more money than most, but I never wanted a wife who cared only about riches. I needed someone with a kind heart, strong spirit, and true love. I'd heard about your struggles, your kindness, and your sacrifices for your family, and I wanted to see if it was genuine, not just a pursuit of wealth." Mia's heart pounded as she shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I don't care how you look," she said in a trembling voice. "I just want my husband back. I promise to care for him, even if he's older and wrinkled. I won't be fooled by appearances." The young man's eyes filled with an emotion Mia couldn't quite understand as he softly asked, "Do you remember the old man you helped when you worked as a cashier in the city?" Confused, she replied, "What do you mean?" He continued, "One evening, a tired, weak old man came to your shop, struggling to pay for his food because his wallet was missing. You paid for him, helped him sit down, and even served him warm tea until he felt better. It was a small act of kindness, but it left a mark." Mia's heart skipped a beat as she recalled that rainy evening when an exhausted man had walked in, counting his coins and realizing he didn't have enough money. She had seen the pain and embarrassment in his eyes, and without hesitation, she had helped him. Now the stranger was reminding her of that memory. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked quietly. The young man smiled sadly. "That old man was my grandfather. He never forgot your kindness that day. He told me you were like an angel, a pure, compassionate soul, and he wanted to know more about you. He even asked me to marry you." Mia's mind spun as she processed his words. "At first, I refused," he admitted. "I wasn't a believer in arranged marriages and didn't want to marry someone I'd never met. But then my grandfather passed away, and his last wish was for me to marry you. I wanted to honor that wish, but I didn't want to force you. So I came up with a plan. I disguised myself as an old man to test you, to see if you were as kind and compassionate as my grandfather believed you would be." Mia sat there stunned and confused. Everything she thought she knew was falling apart. "What I didn't expect," he added, "was to fall in love with you the moment I saw you. You've been nothing but an angel to me, just as my grandfather said." Slowly, everything started to make sense. The way he had listened to her, the respect he had shown her family, and then his final words that made her heart stop. "The Mr. Alexander that everyone knows is my grandfather. My name is also Alexander." Mia was silent, her mind reeling with emotions. Everything she believed and everything that seemed real had changed. The man she had agreed to marry wasn't really an old man at all. He had been testing her, watching her, and he had fallen deeply in love with her. Looking at him, the handsome young man standing before her, she wondered if she could ever trust him. Her heart pounded as he suddenly clapped his hands, and the door opened to reveal two makeup artists. "Watch closely," he said softly. For the next few hours, Mia sat still as the artists worked on his face, layer by layer, wrinkle by wrinkle, until the young man gradually disappeared, and, right before her eyes, Mr. Alexander returned with the same old, wrinkled face she had come to know, the same man she had vowed to care for. Overwhelmed with emotion, Mia stood up, walked forward, and gently touched his face. She could feel the makeup, the disguise, but in that moment it didn't matter anymore. A sob escaped her as she threw her arms around him, saying, "I don't care how you look, young or old, I love you." Alexander held her tightly and whispered back, "And I love you, Mia." in that embrace, with tears of relief and happiness streaming down. Nothing else mattered. Not his age, not his appearance, not even the way their unusual story had begun. All that mattered was their love, and from that day forward, they lived happily ever after.